Welcome to Letters to Rising Leaders. It's a podcast series about God, soul, love, and leadership. And I'm your host, Tom Mohr. For those of you joining along in my book, Letters to Rising Leaders, this is week 32, and the topic is diplomacy. I've shared with you the disciplines of goodness ladder, right? Our faith lives formed in piety lead us to decency, which leads us to civility, which leads us to charity. And a decent, civil, charitable nation is one more likely to strengthen democracy, and a healthy democracy positions us to be able to better pursue virtuous diplomacy, and then on from diplomacy to sustainability. That's the disciplines of goodness ladder. Diplomacy is so important in our world today. Every morning when I get up, I get myself a cup of coffee and I sit down and I start scrolling through my iPhone. And when I do, I immediately encounter the latest news on the hottest conflicts going on around the world. And whether it be in Ukraine or in Israel or in the South China Sea or on the Korean Peninsula or wherever we may look, we see conflict underway. And so it has been throughout human history. We human beings seem to be prone to violence, to be prone to resolving our differences through force. I want to share today the story of Dag Hammarskjöld, Swedish economist and diplomat who was elected the second Secretary General of the United Nations in 1953 at the age of 47. He was the only prospect for the job that the Soviets and Western nations and China and other nations could agree on. That was probably because he was a man of unimpeachable integrity, and that was visible to everyone. Now, at the time, just 8 years had passed since the end of World War II, which had claimed 75 million lives. So keeping the peace was of utmost importance. Europe at this point had been cut in two by the Iron Curtain. Millions of people had been displaced. Stalin was in control of Eastern Europe. The West had mobilized to block Soviet expansion. Japan and Germany were in shambles still. Many Jews who had survived the Holocaust had fled to Palestine, where they were seeking to establish a new state of Israel, fighting against British colonialists and native Palestinians. Independence movements had sprung up in multiple countries, including the peaceful one in India under Mahatma Gandhi and Masali Haj in Algeria. There were flashpoints going on everywhere. And into that world came Dag Hammarskjöld. He was an activist. He ran to the conflict to try to resolve conflict. He knew that was his most important job. And in the brokering of differences, he invented shuttle diplomacy. He once said, "You can only hope to find a lasting solution to a conflict if you've learned to see the other objectively, but at the same time to experience his difficulties subjectively." And using those principles of seek first to understand, then be understood, he worked to reduce the tensions amongst the great powers, to end the Suez Canal crisis, to bring peace to the Middle East. And then in September of 1961, he was shuttling back and forth to try to broker the end of a civil war in the Congo when he was killed in a plane crash. John F. Kennedy called him the greatest statesman of our century. He's the only one to have ever been posthumously awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He was a leader of goodness. And I think we can learn something about him and his approach to leadership, because throughout his life, he cultivated a deep and abiding interior relationship with God. We know this because his journal, which covered his spiritual journey from his 20s onward, was found in his New York apartment after he died. And it was published as a book under the name Markings. I have it in front of me now. Let me just read a couple of entries. Before thee, Father, in righteousness and humility. With thee, brother, in faith and courage. In thee, Spirit, in stillness. Thine, for thy will is my destiny. Dedicated, for my destiny is to be used and used up according to thy will. He wrote about his own pridefulness. Writing about himself, he said, "You listen badly and read even worse, unless it's about yourself. Then you pay careful attention." Hammarskjöld's connection between God, the work inside his soul, and his role as a servant leader was unbreakable. And I think we can learn from that. I don't know whether you're called to diplomacy, whether it be to work inside the State Department or to go to work for the United Nations or to serve on a mission trip to build houses in Mexico or to set up a sister city relationship between your city and some city in another country. But if so, I share what Jesus said at the Sermon on the Mount when he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." I'm going to leave it there. The song for this week is called "Ain't Gonna Study War No More." It's a black spiritual. Robert Berry joins me on instrumentals, and J.J. Johnson joins me in harmony. I hope you enjoy it.
I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside and study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I'm gonna lay down my words of hate down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my words of hate down by the riverside and study war, no study war. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no study war no more.
Gonna talk with that Prince of Peace down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. And I'm gonna talk with that Prince of Peace down by the riverside and study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Gonna spend time with Jesus down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna spend time with Jesus down by the riverside and study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna
gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside and study war no more. Well, that's it for today. I hope you'll join us next week for the next episode in this Letters to Rising Leaders podcast series. As I say each week, leader of goodness, go in faith to love and heal the world.